I'm going to show you how to make sync wires, and it's going to require a little bit of soldering, not much. I was new to soldering, relatively easy to pick up. It is going to require some of these, and in this case, what I was connecting my wires to was these 3.5 millimeter plugs, and 10 of these, as well as the soldering iron, solder, and rosin. I got the whole thing at Amazon. I think it was like $20. So not that expensive. And the reason that I did it is because I have literally a box full of cables that look like this. So typically on one end, it's going to be 3.5 millimeter. 3.5 is a valuable jack to me. It goes into Pocket Wizard. But on the other end is the PC Sync jack, and that's the one that you see here on the left. And those are not used almost anywhere. So that is the part of the cable that I salvaged, that I cut. And then I would take the 3.5 millimeter connectors that I purchased and I would solder them back to the cable and made these. So in this case, the black cable had a 1/4 inch mono, phono mono jack on one end, and I soldered the 3.5 millimeter on the other. And then I had a red cable that had a 3.5 millimeter, and I soldered another 3.5 millimeter on it. The packs that I have, most of them take a 1/4 inch mono. Some of the packs made by Dynalite or Speedotron take a household plug, and I'll talk about that at the end of this video. And the brown color packs actually take a 3.5 millimeter. That's how you plug the sync cable in. So that's why I made the red cable. So anyways, I'm not going to get into how you do the soldering. You can find a lot of good videos on soldering. In fact, there are guitar technicians that have a ton of these. So guitars, the phono plugs that go into guitars, people like to resolder those. So I would go there to learn how to solder. But what I would say is that they're going to tell you to use rosin. They're going to tell you very specific techniques in terms of how to apply the solder. And they're going to tell you, how to even prime the tip of the soldering iron and how hot the soldering iron should be. And you want to listen to all of that. So I had 10 of these jacks, and I ended up having to salvage 2 of them because I didn't really pay attention to what was in those videos. So the rosin actually helps the solder stick to the metal. And I got a soldering iron that was rated at 60 watts. It went up to 400 degrees Celsius. And again, it was between $10 or $15. And it came with rosin and solder as a kit. So I would go with something that was that power, because the hotter you can make the soldering iron, the easier it is to do the soldering, supposedly. And at any rate, one of the things you're going to be looking at here is the pin number 1 and the tip. It's called pin 1 mono audio. So that's the tip wire, and the tip is actually what triggers the strobe to fire. The other wire, the pin number 2, is simply a ground wire. So when you're taking a look at your wires, you can use some additional equipment, and in this case, it's a multimeter. And if you have a multimeter, that's great. If you don't, I wouldn't buy one. But the multimeter will allow you to measure resistance, and that, allows you to figure out, which of the exposed wires in your cable is connected to the tip and which one is connected to the ground. So you can, again, watch videos on multimeters. I'm not going to get into too much detail on that here. I wouldn't buy a multimeter. Nor would I buy the cable stripper that I have there. I just use them for other things besides photography. And in fact, what I found by opening the cables is there were two types of cables. One would have a white sheath, and that's the one you see here. The white sheath was the tip wire, and the non-white sheath, in this case it was just exposed copper wire, was the ground. And in the other type of wire that I found, it would have been a red sheath that would have been the tip wire. So by tip wire, I'm talking about in this case, the pin number 1 for mono audio. It's the wire that goes to the tip. Other things about wiring is that when you strip the wire, that black sheath, you ideally don't want to strip too much of the black sheath off. You want to make sure that the solid black sheath is working at the end of that black cover by the time you get to the flexible part of the cover, the non-solid part. And so think of it this way: if you the solid part protects the wires really well, the flexible part sort of protects the wires. You don't want to leave exposed wires, and in this case, the white one and just the bare copper, any place outside of the solid black area. So that was another mistake that I made. It wasn't the end of the world, but it was a little bit frustrating. Half of them I didn't pay attention to that, so I had to do some corrective work. But yeah, that's the other thing that I would point out here. And then finally, this kind of plug here, you'd say, well, whatever, it's just a electrical plug. Well, it's not. This is a non-polarized plug. I got it at a big box. It was made by Leviton. And what's unique about it is that both of the blades are narrow and the same size. I wish the older packs that I used didn't have this restriction, but they do. And at least the Speedotron as well as the Dynalite. But this is about $3 at a big box store. You wired it up with screws, and the width of these brass tips is the same width if you were to take a look at the plug on a household lamp, the narrower of the two. If you look at a household plug closely, you'll notice that the tips are different widths. One is more narrow than the other. So you won't, and at Home Depot, which is where I got this, you would just search for non-polarized plugs and just make sure that they're both of the tips are narrow. And these are hard to find at a photo store. If you buy a specific cable that's got a 3.5 millimeter jack at one end and a phono plug or a household plug at the other, they're like over $10. So this alone, if you have a Speedotron or a Dynalite, would be a reason to wire up your own, your own jack. Anyways, I hope that helps. It's not that hard to do. It doesn't really take that much equipment. It's relatively inexpensive, and it's a way to kind of reuse existing wires if you're like me and you've collected a few.